not let that happen. This is not about being seen. This is about being heard and activating a total transformational change so that we can meet our joint goals. And so the last thing that I would say, pardon me, is that together we are working with the French government and the UNFCCC on a final pledge at the end of Paris to say, we are here to stay, we are not going home, we want to work with governments now that you've come to a deal. We hope we'll be able to say an ambitious and a robust deal. So I hope that you will join me in signing that pledge. I can't give you more detail, but if you come to me, I can direct you to the website. We need as many non-state actors signing that pledge to indicate that we are not going home. We're going home post-Paris, but we are here to stay in terms of our message, which is loud and clear. Transformation has to happen, and we are part of that robust deal. Thank you.
Johnny Siva, Stanford. My microphone.
It's okay.
It's on. So my work is on what's called technology disruption. It's when new technologies essentially wipe out the old system. That's what digital cameras did to film, and that's what cell phones did to, for instance, landline telephony. And essentially, I wrote a book about a year ago called Clean Disruption that has done the numbers, and essentially the conclusion is that within 15 years, by 2030, all the energy in the world is going to be provided by solar and wind secondarily. All vehicles will be electric and self-driving. And this is going to happen. This is inevitable. These are technology disruptions. And this has nothing to do with governments. This has nothing to do with climate or with carbon targets. These are technology disruptions, just like, again, digital disrupted film and so on and so forth. And just to give you a couple of ideas about how this is going to happen, within 5 years, in essentially every market around the world, the cost of rooftop solar is going to be cheaper than the cost of transmission, not the cost of electricity. The cost of rooftop solar is going to be cheaper than the cost of transmission. So even if you generate in your nukes or coal or gas or diesel plant at zero, even if you bring the God particle and you generate miraculously at zero, when you add the cost of transmission, you still cannot compete with rooftop solar. So that is already starting to happen in places like Australia, and it's going to happen everywhere in the world, from Berlin to Cape Town, within the next 5 years. And when that happens, essentially, the dynamics of energy are going to change, and there's going to be consumer pull. Everyone, from IKEA to Walmart to individual households, everyone's best selfish economic interest is going to be to put up as many solar panels on as many roofs as possible, because that's the way in which they can get the cheapest energy. It so happens that that's going to be the cleanest form, and what solar cannot eat, basically wind will do. On the other side, electric vehicles, again, the cost of batteries is coming down so quickly by about 16% per year. And by about 2020, the industry will be able to make a $30,000 electric vehicle that goes 320 kilometers. And when that happens, essentially, no diesel car, no gasoline car, on average, will be able to compete. And batteries are still going to keep going down to the point that essentially, if the current costs, so this is all about exponential thinking. The cost of batteries is going down by about 16% per year. So if they keep going down like that, by 2025, 2026, every new vehicle will be electric. And when that happens, essentially nobody will buy a gasoline car, not because, again, green, but because EVs are 10 times cheaper to charge on a per kilometer basis. They're more powerful, and also they're 10 to 100 times cheaper to maintain. I mean, your gasoline car has 2,000 moving parts. A Tesla Model S has 18 moving parts. So essentially what I'm saying is that what we're seeing is two parallel, or actually four, parallel technology disruptions caused by the exponential improvement in the cost of solar, batteries, electric vehicles, and self-driving. And that combination is essentially going to wipe out the whole existing infrastructure of energy and transportation, and it's going to happen in 15 years.
Thank you. I would like to live in this future world Tony just described. I'm Todd Edwards at the Stanley Foundation, and I'm going to take a slightly different approach and talk about galvanizing the groundswell climate actions that is happening all over the world. Many of these initiatives you're probably hearing about today. A lot of speakers from the business community and from other organizations. A lot of the sponsors that you see here on the sign are doing things all over the world. Which is fantastic because we need that climate action now. We just heard that, the INDCs are going to maybe get us to the 2.7 degree mark, but we need to be pushing that curve down to the 2 to the 1.5. And to do that, we need more ambition. And to get to that ambition, we need to send the right market and policy signals to the policymakers. So if we take the groundswell of action that's happening all over the world and individual initiatives, and if we can find a way to coalesce it and magnify that voice, those signals, then it gives a better chance for there to be higher national ambition. And so that in 2020, when there's ratcheting up of the INDCs or other periods, the voluntary INDC ratcheting up, then maybe we could see that curve is going to be dropped down even farther. And I say it in the sense of looking at it from that UNFCCC perspective, because of what's happening all around the world, these are complementary to what the negotiators are doing. And by complementary, I mean, sure, the negotiators are making commitments, but it's on the ground where the actual implementation is happening. And it's on the ground that these signals are coming from so that the national governments can do more. And why that's important is because the measurement, reporting, and verification mechanisms, the double accounting and additionality criteria are going to be set in that larger process. We don't need to put more MRV on businesses or on other organizations or on NGOs, but we can show the commitments that they're doing, and we can do some assessments to show the amount of mitigation that is capable there. And sustainable development as well. And so these are signals that can be sent. And how that can happen is through what just was launched last year, COP20 in Lima, through the Lima Paris Action Agenda. The Lima Paris Action Agenda is the third pillar out of four that is a key to success in Paris. So in Paris, we want the agreement, the INDCs, the solutions agenda, the Lima Paris Action Agenda, and then the finance mechanism. So diving down a little bit more into this Lima Paris Action Agenda, what does that mean? It means that action coming from the groundswell, which is cities, regions, companies, civil society, community-based organizations, that needs to have a bit more presence and recognition within the formal process, and that's being done through the non-state actors zone of climate actions known as NASCA. I just looked this up a couple of days ago. And as of Tuesday, I think it's rolling back there were 10,773 total commitments from 2,255 cities, 2,025 companies, 150 regions, 424 investors, and 235 CSOs. These are coming from different networked organizations like CDP, We Mean Business, ECLAI C40, R20, cooperative initiatives, Compact of Mayors, Compacts of States and Regions. And this is really a way to magnify the amount of action that's happening at the ground level to show the policymakers that things are happening, implementation is happening, and we can go farther faster than where they're currently giving their commitments. This is a key component to what's happening on the non-state actor level. Individual initiatives are fantastic, and they are going to drive us to the world that we want to be. But if we look at it as the culmination of all of these, the magnitude in that signal is so much greater, and we can definitely have more ambition going forward. I think I'm probably running out of time here just a little bit, but yeah, the others. Anyway, so as UNDP, you might not be that familiar, but our job basically is work with program countries. We know over 140 countries working on climate change, working with governments on the whole range of issues for mitigation and adaptation. So if you think INDCs, since we are now in the world of INDCs, what needs to be done to make an INDC become reality? We work on all of these issues at the country level. Probably the biggest, or at least one of the biggest grant assistance providers to climate change support to developing countries. We don't do large infrastructure. Our colleagues from the different institutional banks, etc., do that kind of work. Now, non-state actors, to put it plainly, it was already said the INDCs will get us to 2.7, that's the estimate, but only, and you know that the INDCs cover the year to 2030, only if the trajectory we would be getting onto for the next 15 years would be continued after 2030, and that's also not certain. And I think the key issue really is that unless the non-state actors fully come on board, we will not get even close to 2 degrees, let alone to 1.5, which I think we all agree nowadays is preferable. So what, from a multilateral UN perspective that works in the public sector, what are some of the things that the non-state actors will look forward to? The first one, and we get often asked this question, the first one is simply broader than those kind of non-state actors that work, let's say, on renewable energy or the kind of business opportunities that you would see to get to a decarbonized world, is to get your own house in order, understand how climate change will affect your business, your work, your assets, and then move towards decarbonizing your business as well. I think everybody has to realize that they have to make a contribution to get us to this goal. The second part is much larger, coming back to the INDCs. It is really to see the INDCs not as a planned instrument to reduce emissions. And we still very much in this climate world talk to ourselves, you know, almost in an echo chamber. If you go to the public at large, an INDC, what is that, you know? Nobody has a really clear idea what that even means to anyone. But really articulate these as a vision for a decarbonized world, for zero carbon as an objective, and as a driver for sustainable development. There's huge business opportunities in here, and we need to use this momentum to actually position an INDC as such an instrument, as the public and the private sector works together. In terms of the work we do with non-state actors, I think what we have to do much better is that we work in public-private partnerships are not new, but we don't really do them all that often or all that well. And there's such huge opportunities for us actually to bring certain things together. For instance, on mitigation adaptation strategies. For instance, on de-risking. We've done a lot of work in a number of countries on de-risking the investment environment, so for an investor to come in. We will be announcing, I think it is tomorrow, a new initiative that we are launching together with our colleagues from the Global Environment Facility on aggregation for smallholder household, small micro businesses, medium businesses, for example, on solar. So I kind of bundle these kind of things in a developing country that make it interesting for someone to provide a loan, for instance, so that you can also speed up the solutions that from a technical perspective exist, but often in the countries where we work, where the most vulnerable are, where you really want to bring these technological solutions, you don't have a business environment that allows you to really go in and get it done. Final point, because they're also probably running out of time, right, is to say that another very, very important non-state, let's call it actor or actors, actually some of them are public too, but the insurance sector. There has been some announcements this week in terms of the insurance sector. There's a lot being done in many ways, public-private, only private, smallholder, agriculture, there's de-risking, so there's risk insurance, catastrophic risk, and so on, that are happening. But what we really need to see is for the insurance sector to massively lead this, not come to the table when the public sector invites them, but actually see this as a huge business opportunity and also invest in the kind of decarbonized development that we're looking forward to. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is John Cornbang. I come from Maersk. We have one of the biggest container fleets in the world, and we also have upstream oil and gas and in other businesses. I will not now talk about what we do and what we intend to do, but I'm happy, of course, if you have questions about that. But I think I'll take a broader perspective. I think I will lead on what was said in the plenary Paris, I really believe, having followed this for many years, is a beginning of something. Ivo de Boer asked whether the COP process has grown up on its 21st birthday. I think I'm taking the optimistic glasses on and say, yes, I think it's grown up. And it's grown up not because the gap has been closed yet, it hasn't, we know that, but it's grown up because it's got its process and approach right. And that is, of course, all about, as Sandrine said, the non-state actors. I think that the Peruvians made a great job in that, and I think everybody that cares about this process and this work should compliment the Peruvians again. And I think the French took that really on themselves as well, and has brought this forward. And that's why I think it's a grown-up process now. And that's why I think that we can look with optimism. So I feel we're turning a corner now, and well, Tony's intervention definitely encouraged my thinking on that, absolutely. So just a few thoughts on the bottom-up 2.0, which was said in the program. There's a lot to be said about that. We can have a conversation, and I think from Tony's intervention, we see that on electric cars and the interface that has with renewables, so the energy sector, we probably begin to see a pathway that we can believe in. So I won't talk more about that. I think there are two other issues that needs more attention after Paris from a bottom-up perspective. One is the risk perspective, actually. So I would like to point to the Risky Business Initiative that Bloomberg has initiated. I think that's really important. I think it's really important also to drive further and further momentum. We won't get that top-down level playing field. The momentum comes from the regional and the city level. And the risk perspective there is important. And there it is important what they have done in the report, actually, because very often when we look ahead, we always talk about, well, a certain level of warming would give a certain level of sea rise. What we refer to there in the IPCC reports is actually it's the most likely outcome, but if you look at it from an enterprise risk management perspective, like you would do that, you would care about the disruptive impact and low, but low probability scenarios of 5%. Where you are, and out of that perspective, already now with the greenhouse gases we have in the atmosphere today, the 5% sea rise is around 2 meters. And that's the perspective I think we need to get more of. It's not a prediction game, it's a risk game. So it's about de-risking, it's about mitigation actions on the risk side, and that would drive momentum. And then the final thing that I think needs more attention, but whereas we can see a pathway maybe on the energy mix, I mean, there are hurdles still, of course, on finance and all that, but we kind of see, and we see the technology, and we see the grid parity and all that, then I do think that 1/3 of the problem here comes from agriculture. And agriculture, I don't know that we see the same pathway on agriculture and food, so that's just the other topic that I would place on the agenda to focus more on. Thank you.
Everybody, I wasn't in the plenary, but if Ivo de Boer did say that, I'd probably have to say, don't you know any 21-year-olds have done stupid things? I certainly do. So let's hope we got some wise ones here. I'm also slightly worried that, if indeed EIB is state-owned, I'm advocating for my demise here, James. Hope that's not the case. But five points. We have a big balance sheet, 550 billion, and 1/3 of that is corporate, 1/3 of that is private, the rest is public, I must admit, but I guess we have a fairly balanced view of the world. 5 quick points I wanted to make. One, coming out of Paris is going to be loads of goodwill, I think. One more thing behind Paris, after all. Maybe too much. I do finance. I'm interested in Africa. I was told the other day that there are something like 80 different initiatives trying to chase finance for energy. That's probably about 70 too many. And that's going to cause confusion. That's going to add massively to administrative burdens on governments which have got limited capacities, and it certainly exceeds any bandwidth that we have available for that in the EIB. So I think we need to find the balance between doing good, doing it voluntarily, hopefully doing it out of good self-interest as well, but we also need to exercise some self-discipline, and we need to avoid killing with love, I think is the expression. So second point, alignment of interest and incentives. Personally, I'm a believer in the market, and if everybody's going to make a profit in the same way, that's the best way of getting people to behave in a coherent way. Clearly, we need to get the balance between negative externalities and positive internal returns. I think the financial community, the investment community, has bought into the carbon risk argument. You look at 75% write-off of the American coal industry in the last 24 months. You look at the 500 billion that was lost off the European utilities who were overexposed to hydrocarbons in the last couple of years. That tells you something about the perception of risk and the reaction to risk. So I think those messages are coming home, but we still don't have a carbon price, and we still have highly distorting fuel subsidies in some parts of the world. I think the non-state should be pushing the state much harder to fix that. Third thing, and again, this is a bit of a state responsibility, but I do think the non-state can plead for this, can lobby for this, should be advocating it, and that is regulatory stability and certainty. Again, I come at it from the investment perspective. Investors are pretty simple people. They want three things, and that's certainty, and a bit more certainty. It's possible, but if there's one thing that puts off investment volumes, puts off capital, it's uncertainty which investors can't manage. They can deal with demand risk, they can deal with fuel price risk, they can, especially if the fuel is free, they can deal with a whole bunch of stuff. They can deal with construction risk, but they can't handle governments who change their minds retrospectively. They can't handle governments who won't put a roadmap down for where they want to go in the next 10 years, 20 years. So that, I think, is something which the non-state sector needs to be pushing for much higher. Clear targets within which they can work. Fourth point, I think we all actually need to do what we do best. Okay, it's kind of assume the responsibilities which we put on this earth to do. So governments need to do the stuff we've already talked about, set the framework, set the targets, set the roadmaps, but then they should get out of it, frankly speaking. They should not try and do big government-to-government detailed implementation. What you see happening there, large amounts of money committed, low utilization, not a good way of committing money. Again, I think there's massive resources in the non-state sector which will drive stuff through much faster than governments are trying to do that, especially government to governments. Some standardization, good, yes, let's encourage that, but let's, as you said, bottom upwards. Go forwards where we can, when we can, how we can. Let's not overkill it. And I say this from a European perspective. We've been trying to get one size fits all for the last 60 years. We still have 28 different models for pretty much everything. So, I don't think we should expect other countries, other regions with bigger differences than we have in Europe to automatically move to a kind of highly streamlined, highly standardized approach, and I think we'd lose a lot of time if we wait for that to happen. Final point, finance again. I think there is a responsibility for the state to provide some softer money, some taxpayer money, basically to help with risk mitigation where we are dealing with brand new markets or we're dealing with unfamiliar risks. Sure, but we need to be very realistic. Despite the relatively large amounts of money you hear floating around Le Bourget, first of all, this will be a struggle to deliver. Second of all, it's not going to be sustained for the next 25 years. And in that 25 years, we are going to have to, through the private sector, and especially through the capital markets. I don't think it's going to be very much from the banking system. Corporate world has its own limitations. But especially through the capital markets, we are going to have to mobilize the bulk of that money. And that is going to mean that people have to come forwards from their current risk appetites. They don't have to make massive changes, but they are going to have to come a little bit forwards from their traditional positions. I won't go into the details on what I have in mind there because I don't think time allows. I will simply say that the likes of us, EIB, can help bridge that. But at the end of the day, it's going to be for the corporate sector, it's going to be for the banking sector to move forwards a little bit from where they would traditionally have sat, because otherwise we are not, I think, going to close this gap.
Crow. I've been in the real estate business all my life. So when he said certainty, certainty, and certainty, I thought, hey, you stole that. It's location, location, and location. Or the 3 rules of the real estate developer. A few years ago, I left that business in order to work on environmental initiatives, and have chosen to work within the heart of the beast, if I may say. Being in Texas, being, I won't say a stalwart Republican, but working in the Republican Party, we have created a nonprofit called Earth Day Texas. We have created the largest exposition of environmental initiatives in the world. And we did it by accident. We thought that we would have a big Earth Day celebration, not so much a celebration as an education display of corporations and their environmental initiatives, their sustainable initiatives, corporations, government agencies, colleges and schools, and lest we forget, environmental groups. What we didn't realize is that nobody else in the world is having sizable expo of green. The biggest green expo I've seen, besides Dallas, Texas, is Grand Palais. And it's a beautiful exposition. It's about 1/7 the size of what we have. More than anything, are corporations, some foreign corporations, multinational corporations, primarily American large corporations, Texas companies as well. Secondly, our schools and colleges, Yale, Harvard, and Duke have their sustainability Earth Day in Dallas, Texas. They don't have it in Cambridge or Massachusetts or New Haven, Connecticut. They come to Dallas. Every major university in Texas comes to Dallas, Texas for April 22 for a 3-day exhibition. We believe this next year we'll have several universities from Colorado and Arizona, so we're picking up 2 more states that will come as government and university. Federal agencies, state agencies, city agencies from all over the state of Texas, Department of Energy, Department of Interior, Department of Commerce, don't display environmental expo until now. We've begun this. We are fully prepared and desirous to share anything we have with any other groups. We want to do such a thing anywhere else in the world. We thought this was going on in Paris and Rome and London and Tokyo, but it's not. So we kind of backed our way into it. The environmental groups cover ocean, water, land, air, Oceania, European groups, primarily the large American environmental organizations. So I guess that's all 4 categories. We have 60,000 people. Again, that's a large number for such a thing. Last year, we only had 30,000 people because we had 2 thunderstorm alerts, 1 tornado watch, and rain all day on Saturday. This next year, we think we'll have 75,000 people for the first time making an initiative for visitors from East Coast and West Coast. It's very much a hinterland effort, bringing together of Democrat, Republican, corporation, government. We don't think it happens anywhere else in the United States. We do things in Dallas that Earth Day in San Francisco would not permit. We have ExxonMobil talking about climate change. Thank you.
Right. Well, good range of things to prompt the conversation, I think.
lots of thoughts in my head, lots of questions I'd like to ask, and bits and pieces of information I could chuck in myself from my own experience. But this is a good moment, I think, to draw in the audience. And go ahead, sir. And we'll just move mics around. Yes, come, the gentleman here in the blue suit.
Thank you. Can you hear? No. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. To follow up on Trammell's words, I just want to bring to the attention of the audience 4 numbers. Probably mentioned it again today, but 4%, 25%, 30%, and 25 trillion. So the United States is 4% of the world population, yet we consume 30% of the natural resources and emit 25% of the CO2 throughput to the atmosphere, with a $25 trillion annual GDP, out of a global GDP of 80. So when we talk about the outcome that we all hope for on Saturday, that we've been working for 21 years, and as Ivo says, now we're adults, and we're going to do something smart, like try to come to an agreement that the world can adhere to with mechanisms, and hopefully Tony's right, and it's a market-driven mechanism that can supersede, as Wang Ming has mentioned, our need to have government policy regulation legislation. But we're hoping for something like that to come out, a binding agreement that we can adhere to. But I want to posit that it's so hopeful for me personally to hear Trammell, who's a Republican from Dallas, talking about leadership in the United States, where the Republicans are now holding an Earth Day that attracts 60,000 Americans with those kinds of numbers, such that we can create the Green Bridge with China, who has, together the two countries have half the world's economy. And I'm not discounting the EU or anybody else. So my question to the panel is, do we see President Obama's words on Monday holding any water? Do we see that? As an American, I'm wondering. Thank you.
So there's a few things there. The gentleman behind you wants to make a question or comment as well. Go ahead, sir. I've got that point, and I'll pass it down the line in a minute.
I guess my question would be to Tony. I'm from Canada. I live in the heartland of the oil sands, and I imagine at one time that was disruptive technology. Okay, well,
100 years ago.
Yeah, at one time.
100 years ago.
Yeah, and solar today could be disruptive technology to that. One of the things that really bothers me about where I live is that the reliance on the good income and revenue streams from oil has bred a lackadaisical attitude towards innovation. We've innovated within the sector. We've got carbon capture. We've got things we're doing within it, and everybody where I live keeps promoting that. Well, look at all the things we're doing, and that's all great, but nobody's disrupting outside of the sector. And so what I'm asking is, what happens next? Does that happen again with the next technology? Do we rest on our laurels in the next one and hit another wall with something?
Cool. So I'm going to get one more in. There are actually 2 hands up, but so we'll quickly get 2 more in. And I'm including Saldrine in our extended panel over here as well. So, gentleman over here.
Thank you. My name is Jorge Soto. I work for Braskem, a chemical industry in Brazil. The question is for Tony also, about the disruption technology applied to material. What would be that kind of technology? Because we will still need in the future material to develop our products. What would be that kind of technology?
Material sciences,
Material,
massive change.
energy, transportation,
Lady over there.
artificial intelligence, anybody?
Thanks. Hello, yeah. I wanted to get back to the sustainable agriculture piece, because I think it's great, all this technology and energy efficiency, and autonomous cars, and it's all very exciting and terrific. But basically, we're still losing forest. We're still losing agricultural lands, really productive lands. We're losing soil. Indonesia's burning. Leakage from Amazonian barrier to Paraguay to the Cerrado. And I'm in the apparel sector, so our supply chains, as with most companies, supply chains represent a huge part of the footprint of companies. And there's a lot of work to do there, and there's a lot of good thinking and a lot of incentives and opportunities, but I don't see it coming together in a way that needs to occur. I'd like some comments.
Good one.
Thank
So start thinking about what you want to spell. Perhaps don't do all of them up and down the panel. Very interested in the agriculture stuff. I chair an agricultural development business in Africa, and it's really hard work. And bringing together energy and agriculture and soil protection and water, and it's a really complicated business. Very interested in that. You're going to come. Sonny's going to come up here. We've got a critical, political, but also the political economy question. What happens when the signals are sent from one particular place and not received in another, right? But just because the messenger on Monday is President Obama, it probably doesn't reach parts of the Republican community that perhaps if they were a bit more rational would get that, but they maybe need a different messenger. By the way, I would love to talk to you about your expo. I'm trying to do something in London, which is the mayor announced here on Friday, which has some of the same ideas, so you might be able to share some of your experience. So that one, pick up what you want to do about the politics of the messenger and how it gets into various constituencies. And then material science, what's going on there, and then just some sense of where disruption is heading and who shifts, who moves, who gets to be the one that is the prize winner when this big disruption happens. Interesting example from Canada as well. That'll do as we go now. Who would like to begin?
Let me start with
go with Tony. Who's got the correct question?
Disruption. So disruption usually comes from outside. So incumbents don't have an incentive to disrupt their own business. So you're not going to get a disruption in the oil industry coming from Exxon, Mobil, or the Canadian oil sands folks, or even from the governments that have been captured by energy, right? Regulatory capture, state capture, and so on. Disruptions happen from outside. Does anyone remember a company called Nokia? So 8 years ago, they were the #1 cell phone company on earth, and there was a small company in Cupertino called Apple, who had never built a phone ever, and that phone is this, and that phone essentially destroyed Nokia. So even within an industry, disruption comes from the outside. So even when you know the technology, does anyone remember Kodak? So Kodak knew many of the digital camera technologies. They invented them, but they had no incentive to disrupt their own business model. And so the disruption came from outside. So don't expect disruptions to come from the oil industry, the nat gas, the coal, or the nuclear industry. It's going to come from solar. It's going to come from China. It's going to come from outside companies, right? Same thing in electric vehicles. Apple is building an electric vehicle. Companies, Foxconn, the company that makes your iPhone and your iPad, has announced that they're investing $1 billion to get into the EV markets. These are technology companies, computer companies that are disrupting the automobile industry, right? So the same thing that Apple did to Nokia, these companies are going to do. VW is Nokia, right? When Apple comes into the EV market and with Tesla and so on and so forth. So that's what technology does. And so again, these are technologies. These are not resource economics. So the whole transportation and energy world are shifting from resource economics to technology economics.
And digitization too.
Yeah, it's all digital. So the way that you look at it is the way that you look at the technology adoption life cycle and consumer pool. And again, that consumer pool in energy and transportation specifically is going to happen over the next 5 years in a big way. It's going to accelerate, right? So that's how it's going to happen from the outside.
Really good. And also think of balance sheets. Who's got the balance sheet to make these investments? That's another factor. Sandrine wants to come in. Anything else on this, on the disruption line? Okay, Sandrine, go for it. Oops.
Maybe the mic?
Yeah, go for it.
I completely agree with this point, and I think the major shift is going to be disruption from the outside. But what we're starting to see through our work is that actually there is disruption from the inside in certain companies that really do want to change. If you take DSM, that was actually a coal company, they totally changed their company over the last 50 years and became a nutrition company and are one of the most sustainable companies. Philips, it's a department within Philips, lighting, that actually has taken over and totally shifted the entire company. Lighting was a tiny little department. Appliances were actually starting to drain money from the company. Now lighting is the #1 money earner for Philips. So I do agree that in terms of the complete shift, that needs to happen, but by the same token, we can start to see shifts within those companies that actually are changing from the inside. Chemicals and materials is one of those key areas. And I also think that on the materials side, bringing in the banks and some of the long-term investors to work with material companies in the manufacturing sector, which is partly what we're starting to do, where you start to look at positive investment strategies through breakthrough technologies and really enabling actually some of those companies that do want to change is fundamental. Because we don't want this just to be an incumbents versus the rest of the world game. We actually want to bring as many companies on the journey as possible. There will be losers. Those are the ones that stay behind. But let's see if we can get the middle ground as well of companies to really join us. And the last point on the politics, I fully agree with you. I think it's great what's happening in some of the states in the US, but the fact of the matter and the reality check is Congress is blocking. Congress has told Obama that no matter what you do, we don't care because we're not going to allow you to do it. So the question there is, what are we doing to make those guys that are saying that we need to have this Earth Day in the US accountable for then influencing the politics at home, because that's not happening.
Go ahead, there's a few, yes, grab that, Tom.
Just quickly, on the disruptive technologies, I'm by no means going to be able to speak as well as Tony, and not even about technologies, but just on the innovative strategies that businesses are doing now. More and more progressive businesses are putting an internal price on carbon, and that will affect a lot of their longer-term investment decisions as well as strategies. And it actually gets linked back to the NASCA platform I was talking about, where there is a cooperative initiative called Business Leadership Criteria on Carbon Pricing for setting an internal price on carbon, as well as publicly advocating and communicating that progress. And that currently exists. It's a consortium or collaboration between 5 investors and 51 multinational corporations.
Just probably on pricing.
Go ahead.
On the carbon pricing, we too, for 5 years now, have internally priced carbon. You can't bank it. You can guide your own internal investment decisions, but if you're a small sponsor, you can't take that internal carbon price and start raising capital.
Price signal in the real economy, well that helps. Just hang on, I want to get some other we'll do our best to get back.
Well, two points. I want to comment on the question on Obama's statements in the political economy. And I think everybody that's following this maybe would like even more political commitment from the US. We're all aware about the situation in the US and so on and so forth. But actually, I would like to, I think it's dangerous to be too cynical about it, because I do think that it's also about what does this level deliver to the whole thing. Right? I think the important thing, and that's how the process is now better in the COP process. It delivers, get everybody on board, get just a signal that we're doing this. So the Obama administration made the handshake with China, which is the thing to be made, and that makes a lot of. And if you look at Europe, which is also a continent, the US is almost a continent. That's also different. So the European target right now is ambitious in a certain sense, but it's not. If you compare about how much more will you decarbonize, so the carbon content of the economy, it's not very much. The target is online with what will happen anyway. So what will happen anyway in Europe? Why is that happening? Well, partly because certain regions in Europe, so Denmark is one country with investment in wind very early, and therefore it's starting to get that up running. Other countries have done different things. Norway and Norway's out of this calculation, but have done these innovations. And I think the same thing is happening in the US and California. So all the disruptions we're talking about on cars and renewables now, and especially on the electric cars, it comes from US, it comes from California. So I don't think the difference is that big. I think the difference in rhetoric is enormous, but I do think we see a lot happening in the US, and I do think that the US as an entire economy is actually contributing a lot right now to solving the climate change issue.
No question. John, do you want to come in, since you were kind of cast in your direction?
Two things. On the paralysis of American politics, our group now has worked with the Republican National Committee in Washington, so that we have every month 2 different environmental groups go to the RNC offices and meet with the chairman of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus, who I must say, on a personal basis, is a very nice fellow. And he says his name is very strange, Reince Priebus. If you remove all the vowels from his name, it's RNC PRBS. Secondly, we feel that in Earth Day, Texas, we've kind of come full circle in these 5 years, because now finally, after the renewable energies and more cars and trucks green than display in Detroit or Vegas, all these different things we bring together. This year we're bringing ranchers and farmers to Earth Day for display. Farmers and ranchers coming hundreds of miles to exhibit and to come visit something they used to spit at Earth Day. And Cargill, we hope, will bring 5 different ranchers from Montana showing sustainable ranching.
Brilliant. So we're really short time, so we're just going to have to take Joe, because you haven't come in. You do that if you possibly can.
I can.
And we'll do our best to pick up the questions.
We try to do in 1 hour. So many issues have come up. There's not the time, but I just want to say that the obvious entry point, energy, technology, cars, etc., fine. But unless we address agriculture, forestry, who is using the palm oil? Who are these businesses?
Yeah.
Where does this stuff end up in? We need to fix that as well. And I think what we really need, and you see that coming, so this is really great optimism, but is to bring the environmental community and the activists together, bring the businesses together, and actually put much more pressure on the public sector in those countries where we need to fix those things.
We'll do it in Dallas, Texas.
We can do that.
Okay. Sandrine wants. I'm really sorry we're out of time. I mean, there's obviously some energy that needs to be channeled towards further conversations, and that's what events like this are for. And I can only apologise that we can't bring everything in. Sandrine wants to say something about your Women Business campaign, which is relevant.
Yeah, I just wanted to say before everybody leaves here is we haven't yet gotten a deal. The negotiators are actually still very much fighting over the long-term goal. For non-state actors, clarity on the long-term goal is the #1 factor, as well as the 5-year review. And that 5-year review for the moment is actually being pushed to 2025 or 2030. So we've put together some key asks, which is called the business brief. Again, I don't think I bought enough copies, so what I would suggest is that you just let me know who you are. If you're interested, we can send them to you. They're the key messages we're delivering to all the negotiators. And I mean this frankly, we are not going to get the deal we want unless we're all in the corridors as well, and lobbying and campaigning and telling people we are out there, and we need to have a clear long-term goal. The language is moving around all the time, and it may be quite weak by the end of next week. So please, together, we have to get this right.
Got it. Parting shot. Want to comment all the way down?
I want to say one last thing. Let me repeat, by 2020, solar rooftop plus storage is going to be cheaper than transmission pretty much in every country around the world. By 2020, that's only 5 years away. Electric vehicles will be cheaper than the median car, gasoline or diesel car. Essentially, what this is going to do is make every consumer around the world a potential generator, storer, and trader of energy around the world. So we're going to go from a few dozen folks generating energy to billions of people generating. So what the challenge is, I think, is to get the government, what I call the Declaration of Energy Rights, to make every human being have the right to generate, store, and trade energy, right? Because you're gonna get countries like Spain that are gonna tax solar and make it impossible for this to happen. You're gonna get countries that are gonna push back. So if there's one thing that we need to get out is the possibility that when the technology cost gets us here, that the governments do not prohibit individuals and commerce from doing this.
On the phrase that distributed power distributes power, which is true in my view.
So, parting comments. The agreement won't go into effect, assuming it's a strong agreement, but I think that we will have one until 2020. If the review won't be until 2025, maybe even 2030, we need to have the most ambitious commitments now, and the voluntary ratcheting up even before we get to the review periods. And that's going to be done only when there's certainty and a lower perceived risk for making those commitments. And we can do that if there's a louder, more unified voice coming from cities, regions, businesses, civil society in one location. The NASCA platform is a great tool for this. It's not everything. There are other platforms out there for it as well, but it's a start, and I think that we can see this grow to help build that ambition.
Excellent. Joe?
Two very quick points. We supported 43 countries to do their INDC in the past year. Yes, we need an ambitious deal. Yes, we need a review mechanism, but even if we don't, we can start tomorrow making it a more ambitious country by country. So it wouldn't be the end. A lot can be done, but let's push for the ambition. Second point really is, I want to pick up the issue in Spain. Our job is work with governments, so we understand governments, we understand political economy. Let's not forget, if a government makes such a decision, there's very often a business interest, a vested interest behind it. We need to work on that as well. Thank you.
Well, briefly, risk in agriculture. I talked to a couple of city planners and I'm going to tell from where, and they're recalibrating their whole system, water and everything. And I ask, against what scenario? Well, 2 degrees warming by the end of the century and the mean outcome of sea level rise and so on and so forth. I think that's inadequate. So I think we all need to do the 5% worse outcome on our risk analysis. Then on agriculture, I launched it. It's far away from what I do in my daily life, so I don't have the answers. I just think there's a risk now that we all get, I think, very excited about the renewables and the electric cars and that part of the infrastructure in the economy, that we forget about the other one because it's much more difficult.
It's really hard.
It's much more difficult, linked into water, poverty and all that kind of thing, and it's much more linked into change in lifestyles. Because electric car, you have the same lifestyle, just have an electric car, and there's even less noise. It's great. It's just changing. They have the same great life that I have today, but on agriculture it's different, and food on agriculture is different. So we must not forget this now that the other thing gets exciting and maybe easy to some extent.
And just on the probability of risk point, which has been made several times, the British government, the Chinese and the Indian governments in a collaborative venture over the summer did a probabilistic risk analysis of the various IPC scenarios. 50% probability, business as usual, leads to a 6 to 7 degree warming in 100 years. That's grandparent and grandchild standing together, connected, facing an unmanageable risk. Right? 50%. Ask yourself in your own lives, what have you got out there that you deal with every day? It's a 50% probability if you carry on doing what you're doing, right? Christopher.
I just wanted to say something quickly on the agriculture forestry point, because I think it is absolutely key, and I agree it's been a bit of poor relation of the conversations up until now. But a message of optimism, I think. First of all, the people with supply chains and the big food companies, the Nestle's, the Danones, the whoever of this world, they are investing pretty heavily intellectually and financially into fixing some of the problems they've got in their supply chains, and that's real firepower, that's real horsepower. But I think also those who want kind of 2 bangs for their buck, there are 2 gigaton opportunities for mitigating emissions. One's in the Brazilian forest and the other's in the Indonesian forest. Neither is going to be easy, but you can have two bangs for your buck by going into that space. And certainly we in EIB are putting a lot of effort into driving forward new mechanisms, new vehicles which try to get this spread of benefits. We really do need a carbon price which admits forest carbon. Otherwise we are going to be fighting an even harder battle.
Trammell, last word, we've got to go, but last word.
Please come see those issues, confront those issues. There will be a showdown at high noon. April 22 at Earth Day, Texas. I tried to distinguish ourselves as Expo. We will also have over 400 speakers. And come participate in the debate between our fancy girls' school and our impoverished public school on global warming at the Texas Fairground at Earth Day, Texas.
Brilliant. Wow.